We had just arrived in La Paz, the capital of Bolivia, and I was miserable. I had a headache, I felt nauseous, I was dizzy. La Paz sits at an altitude of 12,000 feet, and I had all the classic symptoms of soroche, altitude sickness, and there was no end in sight. The front desk clerk at the hotel sent up a pot of mate de coca tea, which is the traditional treatment for soroche. The coca plant grows throughout the Andes. It's the raw material for cocaine and the basis for the region's drug trade. Mate de coca doesn't have a narcotic effect, it just relaxes you. All I remember about that afternoon is that after I drank the tea, I fell sound asleep, and when I woke up, I felt much, much better. It was 1976. My ex-husband, Brian, and I had just finished our master's degrees, and before we moved on to real life, we set off on a 4-month trip through Latin America. Our travel Bible was a guide called Latin America on $10 a day. It was the 70s, and we depended on it for cheap travel advice along the way. We started out in Mexico, worked our way down through Central America, where we had served in the Peace Corps, flew to Bolivia, and then traveled north into Peru. In Peru and Bolivia, it's not unusual to see folks chewing on coca leaves to help get them through a long, cold workday. In a market in Cusco, close to Machu Picchu, we noticed that people carried their coca leaves in small woven bags. We didn't buy a lot of souvenirs because we were traveling light, but we did buy one really old, intricately detailed bag that belonged to the vendor. We shook out the leaf scraps really carefully, threw it into our suitcase, and forgot about it. From Cusco, we traveled north by bus through Peru and into Ecuador, where our first stop was Cuenca, a beautiful historic city in the southern highlands. I'd read a lot about Cuenca, and I was really looking forward to checking out the view of the city from a nearby mountaintop. As soon as we got off the bus, we asked around for directions to one of the hotels recommended in our travel guide. Once we settled in, I walked down the hallway to the central bathroom to take a shower. At $10 a day, even in the 70s, there was no private bathroom. When I got back to the room, I was startled to see Brian talking with 2 scary-looking guys with guns shoved into their belts. Honestly, these guys looked exactly like thugs from an old black and white gangster movie. They flashed some kind of ID in our faces that seriously could have been anything, and they said they were from Interpol. They wanted to know why we had asked directions to that particular hotel, which, according to them, was a known location for drug deals. And they told us flat out that since we had just come from Peru, they knew we had to be smuggling drugs. Now, this whole conversation was happening in rapid Spanish, and I was working really hard to keep up with it. And I was also starting to freak out about where this whole thing was heading. One of the guys insisted that they would have to search our luggage. When he made a move towards our suitcase, Brian realized that he could be about to plant something, and so he said, "Well, we do have this small bag that used to hold coca leaves." Well, when they heard that, their eyes lit up and their chests puffed out. Brian rummaged around in the suitcase and handed the bag over. Once they had evidence, everything escalated. The second guy looked at me with his small beady eyes and demanded to know if we had any other drugs. I thought about it for a long moment, and then I said, "Bueno, tengo una botella de aspirinas que uso cuando tengo dolores menstruales." And I threw in a whole lot of TMI for good measure. Looks of horror spread across their faces, and they physically recoiled, backing away towards the door. Apparently, when you describe in excruciating detail to a couple of scary-looking macho guys pretending to be Interpol agents that you have a bottle of aspirins you use when you have menstrual cramps, it's like throwing kryptonite at Superman. They told us to never bring drugs into Ecuador ever again, and they shot out the door. And just in case they changed their minds and decided to come back, we threw everything into our suitcase and took the next bus out of Cuenca. Well, unfortunately, I never got to check out the view of the city from a nearby mountaintop, but I did learn a really, really valuable lesson. If you're ever feeling threatened by some scary-looking macho guys pretending to be Interpol agents, try yammering on and on about feminine hygiene. It just might save the day. Thank you.